In the current state of the country right now, we always have to ask ourselves, are we making things worse with our actions? Is a push for reform and justice and equality, does it have the potential to create waves in the wrong direction and eventually create a tidal wave against those that are fighting for equality, justice, and just to make the world a much better place, to where we're safer, to where we're actually more connected with each other? We cut down on racial injustice and systemic racism and everything that you hear. Is there a possibility that the actions of a lot of this could be radicalizing many in the direction that they are trying to fight? What I have done is I have reached out to several different people on all sides. I've reached out to people in Black Lives Matter. I've reached out to people in Antifa. I've reached out to people on the alt-right. And I've even come across people that were originally on one side or the other, but have kind of gotten turned off from everything that's going on. This man that I have for you right here today was one of those people. He was actually as far right as you can get. He was considered to be a white supremacist to anybody that's fighting against him, but his identity and many others that were in his fold identified themselves as National Socialists. Many of you know what National Socialism is. It's always related to and identified as something that's white supremacist or something that's racial in nature. What this man has done is he has thought back into how he may have been radicalized into that belief system and has since changed his ways and has been free from white identity and white supremacy now for well over 10 years. And what he's going to do, he's going to share his story with all of you. He's going to tell you about how he got into it, how he got out of it, and some of the dangers of what's going on right now, how it could possibly be radicalizing many other young men and women into the white power world and the white nationalist or National Socialism world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to all of you Dane Christensen. How you doing, Dane?
Doing well. Glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
All right, so just tell us a little bit about, your upbringing, the environment that you grew up in, and how you became radicalized into white supremacy.
All right. Well, I could put that in a nutshell. I was born in the outskirts of Los Angeles County. It was in a small, I'm at a loss for words right now, but it was a canyon area. It was right outside of Sylmar. It was called Kagel Canyon. I know that sounds like a funny name, but that's actually what it's called. You could look it up, Kagel. But anyway, about 1.5 years old, moved to Lancaster, California. Most people know where that is. Grew up mostly in homeschooling, with the exception of kindergarten, and then 3rd to 5th grade. About the age of 15, my family moved outside of Lancaster to a small mountain community, which I'm going to remain nameless. And yeah, it was a ride for sure, because essentially most of my entire life as a child and a youth was spent by oneself. And that could cause a little bit of turmoil, because as we were discussing earlier off the camera, what's the worst thing you could possibly do to somebody, even in a prison? And that's lock them down completely by themselves, where they don't have any contact with others. So eventually, around the age of 15, I get into politics, looking at some right-wing movements, Libertarian Party, back when it was actually real libertarianism, some of the far constitutionalist, quote unquote, constitutionalist right-wing parties. And I wasn't impressed. So I delved a little bit further and I found some National Socialist organizations. I don't want to name them because I don't think that's fair. But essentially, I reached out to them. They spoke with me. They sent me some literature. And without saying anything too much to incriminate myself, I began to distribute that literature. And I was essentially their little puppet. Go around there, you know, what I can say is I go to libraries, they take their little leaflets out, their stickers, and put it inside a book, inside of restrooms, whatever I had to do. And that led from one thing to another. And as the years progressed, it got me into some trouble. Eventually, I decided to join the military. Originally, I wanted to go in the Marine Corps, but they wouldn't take me based on the fact that I had a GED. And the only reason I had a GED was the simple fact that my folks did not get my homeschooling accredited with the state of California, which in turn, that means I didn't exist on paper, so I had to take the GED. So no Marine Corps, no Army. But the Navy would take me. And when I went into the delayed entry program, everyone knows what that is. That's been in the military. They sign you in, they swear you in. But just a side note, if you swear in the delayed entry program, everybody out there, in case you have second thoughts and you don't want to go through with it, you are not obligated to join the military, and that's a fact, because the second time you go back, they swear you in again, and that's when they have you. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, right after I got into the delayed entry program, I decided to adding tattoos and so forth, and I flew under the radar. Went into the military with skull, lightning bolts, iron cross, Confederate flag, pentagram, crucifixes, that kind of stuff. And as you would imagine, that eventually became an issue, and that led me to being discharged. But I was fortunate enough to have that be an honorable discharge, and it was put under as a personality disorder. Excuse me. So I get out and essentially go about my life and become more and more radicalized, which in turn led to fights, especially because of the fact that I eventually got into working in bars, several different bars over an 11-year period. So when you're working in the restaurant bar business and you have a bunch of racial white supremacist tattoos blatantly, that's going to become an issue. And that led to a lot of confrontations, a lot of fights, and it was just a bad situation altogether.
So from when you were young, like what led you into this radicalization process? Like what did you like experience? I mean, what was your, did you grow up in did you grow up in an all black neighborhood? Did you not grow up in a black neighborhood? Were there like people in your family that might have indoctrinated you? What do you think like pushed you in that direction?
My family is not racist per se, especially my immediate family. But on my father's side, there was some definite suggestion. That's actually a word. There was a lot of suggested talk about non-whites being inferior on a very subtle level. So that always played into my head, of course. And I'd be lying if I said I grew up in an all-black neighborhood. But everybody in my age bracket were black. And here I am, as you could plainly see, very white. And that didn't go very well for me. There was a lot of fights, confrontation, and I didn't have any close friends. So as you could imagine, that pissed me off to no ends. And one thing led to another, and all the external forces and being isolated, not having any friends, not having anywhere to turn, not having a true identity, if you will, it just gradually wore on me and wore on me. I could never relate to the, and I'm going to get some hate for this, but I couldn't relate to the black culture, what was being forced down everyone's throat as I saw it back then with the MTV and the rap videos and the NWAs and these different groups that came out, and they're all pushing, F the police and this and that. And to me, it was disgusting. I couldn't relate to it. I was absolutely horrified and appalled. And that just pushed me further and further into kind of a corner. And all these external sources, and then having, being psychologically drained and not really knowing who I was at the time, led me to go down a rabbit hole. And that went into a lot of National Socialist literature, reading Mein Kampf, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is actually a very, very good book if people want a true depiction of what actually happened back then without any slant or rhetoric. But anyway, yeah, that's essentially how it began. External and internal forces.
So a lot of these things that you were seeing, like you were saying with MTV, the way you were treated, like in the club stuff. But before, I want to focus on before you were actually working in the restaurant industry, because you were already radicalized by that time, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. So a lot of the stuff that you seen like on MTV, the rap music, in your mind, did you feel like that maybe, people that looked like you or people that shared your skin color, white males, did you feel like that maybe the entertainment world, like Hollywood, the media and stuff, was marginalizing you, maybe trying to push a narrative that made you seem more inferior, and that kind of was antithetical to what you were feeling? Because you said that, you're somewhere in your father's side of the family that, you were kind of taught that everybody else was inferior to you. So did it make you feel like, with the programming you were getting from your father's side, that everybody else is inferior to you, but yet you turn on the TV, and did it feel to you like the media and everything and Hollywood was trying to make you look like you were inferior?
Absolutely. Because and people are going to hate on this, but it's a fact. Any popular programming, comedy, film industry, music that was mainstream made it seem as if the black thing was the cool thing. That was the in thing. That's what you're supposed to be like. Glorification of violence and on the streets and this and that, and everything is the way of the fist or the way of the gun. Fast women selling drugs, blah, 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 blah. And to me, it was just pure BS. It was disgusting. And still to this day, I don't like it. I can understand where somebody would be drawn to that, but from my standpoint, no. Yeah, I definitely felt marginalized. I felt as if not just myself, but white males in particular were being portrayed as being weak or soft or essentially punks or bitches.
It's funny you say that, because I did a video, and I got a lot of heat for it from a lot of people that supported this dude. But I did a video on pretty much like fact checking the phenomenon of Wes Watson, right?
Yeah.
And what I've seen from him, and from pretty much I would have to say like well over 90% of his fan base is young white males
Yes.
between probably the ages of 18 to, I would say, 35. And
Nail.
yeah, what I see is I see a lot of young men who probably don't have any real self-esteem because, you know, I've talked to quite a few different ones that have like basically moved away from him. And a lot of the ones that I talked to were always, you know, a lot of, not all of them, but a lot of them were the same thing. You know, I feel marginalized. I feel like the media is portraying me as weak and as feeble and impotent and all that. And this is what I'm hearing from people in regards to Wes. And to them, you know, they see this big, strong, buff white dude, and he's like the symbol of power and strength, and it's something that they wish they could be. You know, and what is your take on all that? Can you see how a symbol like him could actually radicalize without even him really knowing that he's radicalizing people?
100%. Because I'll be honest, when he first came out, or right around when he first came out, I watched his videos. I thought he was actually pretty good. He had some decent things to say, and on some level, I still do. He has a lot of good points, and if anybody out there is a fan, I would suggest that just because I'm saying so, don't write the guy off, because he does have a few decent things to say. But
Yeah, I've always said that myself.
Yeah, absolutely. But essentially, to answer your question, yes, he's the archetype of what a lot of white males espouse to be. He's big, he's yoked, he's intense, he's got tattoos all over his body. He's not afraid to say whatever on his mind. He's the epitome. He's just the quintessential tough guy, and he's very, very well read and articulate. So I know that I've watched some of his videos, and he's made reference to doing workouts where he ends all his counts with the supreme white power or something like that. And when he slips stuff in there like that, that's going to automatically condition people on some subconscious level to think, yeah, absolutely. You know something, that's the way to be. Get yoked, you know, possibly take steroids. I'm not accusing anybody, but okay, actually I kind of am. But anyway.
It's all good, man. I do it all the time.
But yeah, I mean, to be quite frank, that's the deal. You know, get into putting tattoos on your body, becoming a macho type cat, getting into fights, proving your masculinity, going after random women, because he's mentioned that kind of stuff too. I mean, he is just a stereotypical, quintessential white boy, and he's successful. He has money, and that's going to influence a lot of young white males. And then when he starts slipping stuff in there like white supremacy and supreme white power, and he makes the excuse of that's the way it is. That's when you go in, you have no choice, and you're gonna follow the program, otherwise you're gonna get dealt with, and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that very well may be the case. Yeah. But that's not the right message to be sending young, particularly young white males on the street, because they're going to see that as a rite of passage. Like, wow, this guy found himself. He found out who he truly was, going through the hardships of being in prison, and then he went and he got with the whites, and he essentially found who he was and created this person, this persona who he is to this day. And that could be a huge trigger and a huge problem. And if he sees this, you know, sorry, bro, but those are the facts.
Yeah, in his defense, though, the one thing I could say about him is that he's done a lot to distance himself from being looked at as the archetype for, you know, white supremacy. I mean, his wife that he's married is definitely not white. Number one, and number two, he's stressed many times that he doesn't believe in racial prejudice and all that. But the thing about him is it's about anybody that's in that is the point I was trying to make is not to make this about him, but the point I'm trying to make is that he is the living proof that most white men in this country feel marginalized, and they feel that they're being looked at as that they're impotent, weak, soft, cowards, buffoons. They have no rhythm, no style, no sense of fashion or direction or anything like that. And, you know, I'm just saying that when they see somebody like that, you know, it just proves how easily somebody could be influenced and radicalized when you already feel like that you're being marked as inferior to everybody else that's around you. And what do you think that is going on right now as far as like the current white power movement and white supremacy and stuff in this country? I mean, because they've been pretty much shut down almost all over social media and stuff. So
Oh yeah.
what could they possibly do in order to radicalize people at a much larger scale? Or is it just people are going to just naturally be radicalized through these tactics that we talked about of being marginalized or being made to appear as inferior and whatnot?
Well, on a large scale, it's what we just discussed. It's on a subliminal level. And just to clarify, on Wes, you know, I'm not accusing him as being a racist at all right now, but the things he said, people are going to misconstrue, and that's going to get in their psyche. But to go back to your question, on a larger scale, yeah, it's going to be subliminal stuff like that. Seeing strong, stereotypical white males that have that bravado, and they'll gravitate towards that. But as far as being extremely radicalized as a white supremacist, that's going to be more grassroots, and that's what's going on. I'm pretty much positive, because they can't sell their crap on eBay or Amazon. You can't even sell a Confederate flag on Amazon or eBay right now. So I mean, they're gonna do what they did a long time ago, and that's do it from a grassroots level in their community. You know, reaching out to people in events or concerts, stuff like that. And they're just going to go back to square one. They're going to have to go underground and pick and choose who they recruit. And those are their tactics. I know them well. I lived it.
So what was your defining moment, your exodus out of white supremacy? Like what made you choose to leave it? I mean, was it, you know, the internal politics that were going on with it? Was it something that was just going on inside of you? I mean, did you have some kind of like a paradigm shift, something that led you to think that everything that you were being taught was wrong?
Yes. And it was actually a seed that was planted while I was in the military. And I was discussing this with somebody the other day. Actually, I think it was yesterday. But anyway, yeah, I was in the military, and I got up early on a Sunday, which is something I usually didn't do. I went out, you know, exercised, got myself cleaned up, and I'm not on duty. I don't have watch that day or anything. So I'm in Newport News, Virginia, and I'm walking around downtown, and there's a church there. And I'm sure people see where this is going. And it was a full gospel church. I still remember the reverend's name. But out of just for safety reasons, I don't think I should mention it. But anyway, I went to the door, and I noticed everybody that was walking in there, they were all black. not a single white face anywhere. And they were all dressed to the nine. I mean, like easy $2,000 suits or dresses or hats. And I walked in there and the usher looks at me and I look at him and he says, "Good morning." And I said, "Is it okay if I go in?" And he said, "Sure. Like, why would you even ask?" And so he walks me down the aisle while the church was currently in session, and I sit down there and I listen to the word, and I was really taken aback by how receptive they were, because I grew up in churches my whole life and I got nothing but rejection there. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and whine and bitch and complain, but it's just a fact. And that was a complete 180. And I should have seen right then and there that was a sign, like, dude, I mean, what are you doing? What are you thinking? But
how did they treat you?
Like they treat one another. I mean, like no special treatment or dissatisfactory treatment. It was all good.
No cold shoulder or nothing?
Nothing. Not at all.
So after you left this church, how did that make you feel? Like, did you have any kind of like conflict within yourself?
Yeah, I did. And that made me think to myself, something's not adding up here. Something's not making sense, because here I am conditioned to think that I'm superior based on what I was born as, which is, you know, a white male, European American, whatever the politically correct jargon is these days. And, you know, I slowly began to think, you know, nobody truly chooses the skin in which they're born. I know I wasn't. I didn't. And who we are essentially as human beings are our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions. And that sounds like something you read off a bumper sticker, but it's true. And that stuck with me. And eventually, when I got out of the military, I went through a string of different jobs. A lot of them were shit, pardon my French. But eventually it got to a point where I'm not making this up, within a span of a week, I incurred about a $700 bill in car repairs. I lost my place to live. I lost my job. I didn't know where I was going. And can you guess who gave me a job?
I would be willing to bet that it wasn't the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Not at all. It was a black guy.
Awesome. So none of these people in the National Socialist movement, these people you had this camaraderie with, none of them reached out to help you or anything?
I didn't exist.
So this man helped you. He helped you get on your feet. So that was just another piece of validation for shifting that paradigm that I talk about. I like to talk about shifting paradigms because the paradigm is our current state of mind. And so you had the church and you had this. At that point, was that enough validation for you to say that, man, we're all just fucking people, man, and we don't, you know, it's like we're better together and helping each other as opposed to being away from each other.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. And to be completely transparent, it's not as if I didn't slip. It's not as if I didn't occasionally use some language that was inappropriate or just flat out wrong. This I did.